there. So this week I'm continuing my list of Africa's all-time most notorious dictators. Did you see part one? Remember, I'm looking at those dictators who held on to power too long, those who are involved in outrageous corruption and human rights abuse. So let's get to it. Siad Barre, president of Somalia from 1969 to 1991. He was a Somali policeman turned soldier, and he took power after the assassination of then President Abdir Rashid Shamaki. Now, once Barre was in power, he introduced a political ideology system modeled after North Korea's former communist leader Kim Il-sung, and Barre soon would name himself victorious leader, creating a personality cult. Images of him were put up all throughout Somalia, and talk about ruthless. Under him, significant political figures were detained, all political parties were banned, and Barre is credited with creating a serious ethnic divide in Somalia. You know, with people sizing you up and down if you are not affiliated with their tribe. Now, Barre would even poison the wells of his rival tribes. That's crazy. And in 1997, a discovery of mass grave sites of human remains are allegedly attached to his regime. Now, reports say he did silly things too, like banning yawning in public. Anyway, at the time, the U.S. was giving millions in aid to Somalia, but half of that money went to arming tribal groups. And when Barre's reign ended, Somalia fell into heavy armed chaos and eventually an ongoing civil war. Now, Barre died in Lagos, Nigeria from a heart attack. A very bitter man, some reports say. Here's an old clip of Siad Barre on one of his many travels. All right, moving on. Hissène Habré, often compared to Chile's wild dictator Augusto Pinochet. He ruled Chad from 1982 to 1990. He was a smart guy, got a number of degrees, even a doctorate. Anyway, Habré became a military commander of a rebel group, and eventually he formed his own militant group, gaining international attention in 1974 when a member carried out a kidnapping. Now, Habré distanced himself from that, though, and eventually he was made prime minister, and he would go on to overthrow then President Gukuni. Now, Habré's government reportedly carried out about 40,000 murders and about 200,000 cases of torture. And that's all according to his own victims, the Human Rights Watch, and a 1990 Commission of Inquiry. And it's known that his secret police, the Documentation of Security Directorate, acted like hounds, detaining and torturing those opposed to Habré. Now, according to Human Rights Watch, his prisoners were held at an underground prison and tortured in inhumane ways, like ears cut off, cigarette burnings, gas squirted in eyes, held beside decomposing bodies, and so many more. Anyway, he was ousted and found refuge in Senegal, but he was put on house arrest in that country and sentenced to life in absentia. But big news came in 2013. Senegal officially arrested a 70-year-old Habré, and today he's set to face charges of crimes against humanity. Now here's a report on how Habré's victims fought for his arrest.
Hissène Habré has been called the Pinochet of Africa. He ruled Chad with an iron fist for 8 years. He's accused of human rights violations, including imprisonment without trial and the systematic use of torture. After Habré fled the country, investigators discovered mass graves in the desert and accused the dictator of the deaths of more than 40,000 of his fellow Chadians. The trial of Hissène Habré could be the first in which a former African dictator is actually prosecuted in another African country, and would mark the end of an international manhunt that has taken more than 10 frustrating years. In the Christian part.
That's a shame. Make sure you go and watch that full report. It's really interesting. All right, moving on. Next is Idi Amin, or His Excellency, President for Life, Field Marshal Al-Hajj Dr. Idi Amin Dada. That's what he gave himself. He called himself. Now, he ruled Uganda from 1971 to 1979. Growing up, Amin left school at the 4th grade and joined the military as an assistant cook. From there, he made his way up the military ranks, where he would eventually be promoted as Uganda's military commander, and he'd go on to overthrow the presidency of Milton Obote. And once in charge, Amin made it clear that he was a soldier, a hard soldier. He took up posts and transformed the government into a military base. Many Ugandans fled the country, and then an ethnic and politically motivated killing spree took place, with the Amin regime being responsible for the death of nearly 500,000 people, according to rights groups, and many of them being prominent Ugandans. Yes. Now, according to reports, Amin's people had special phrases for killings, like giving the VIP treatment or go with him where he sleeps. Can you believe it? And you know he expelled all Asians from the country in 1972. Anyway, finally, his rule ended thanks to Tanzania. And boy, did people rejoice. Amin fled to Saudi Arabia, where he died from kidney failure. Here's an old clip of Amin lecturing his cabinet ministers.
Love their ministers. They must love their governors. They must love their district commissioners, their teachers, their chiefs. Everybody must be loved. It is an education to the people. This is a duty of the minister. If I see the minister is a coward, automatically I kick you out of my office. Because I know that you have got something wrong with you. I will put another person straight. Or any governor or anybody. This I must make it absolutely clear. And even whether you hide, you will be known.
That Uganda. All right, so you remember Mengistu Haile Mariam, right? The name is a bad memory for Ethiopians. He was Ethiopia's president from 1987 to 1991. He's another military guy who rose to power after control of the country shifted from Emperor Haile Selassie I to a committee of officers which Mengistu would rise as leader of and become president. His rule became known as the Red Terror. That just sounds eerie, right? I mean, numerous murders and tortures took place by the Mengistu ruling group known as the infamous Derg. Reports show that at Mengistu's takeover, he had some 60 ex-officials from the Haile Selassie Empire killed, and that was just the beginning. According to rights groups, nearly 500,000 people were killed during Mengistu's Red Terror, and that's basically genocide. After he was forced out of power, Mengistu was sentenced to death in absentia in 2006, but today he's living fine with the Mugabes in Zimbabwe. But several Derg members are serving jail time. Here's a clip of Mengistu denying being involved in any killings during the Red Terror days of Ethiopia.
It's alleged that you killed 12,000 people to gain power and retain power. Is that true?
Of course, this is absurd. I mean, in the first place, it is not in my nature to kill even an insect or a small living thing, let alone human beings. If anyone perished during the planting of the revolution, it was certainly not on my orders. I did not single out any individual to be killed. This outrages my sense of humanity. How is it imaginable that I ordered the annihilation of 12,000 people?
You have very kindly offered to show us the conditions in which political prisoners are kept. Would you extend that invitation to representatives of Amnesty International?
We have invited them in the past. They have come and visited our prison system, and I renew this invitation anytime. We have nothing to hide.
The country's most famous political...
Can you believe it? He's living a free man, as a free man in Zimbabwe. All right, rounding out the list. Next is Mobutu Sese Seko. Yes, of course, the Congo's a narcissistic dictator who ruled what he called Zaire for 31 years. He was reportedly a clever and rebellious youth who enjoyed pulling off pranks. He went off for military training, and in between rising up the ranks, he worked professionally as a journalist. Now, he came to power after his involvement in a CIA Belgium-backed coup that ousted and murdered his once friend, Patrice Lumumba. Now, Mobutu then transformed the country into a one-party state. He created various military groups in order to protect him and only him. Murder, torture were rampant in his government. People who opposed him would be executed publicly. It's a fact. And his government was full of nepotism, human rights abuse, and yes, massive corruption, with reports stating that he stole up to $14 billion, with more money being discovered after his overthrow. And the most outrageous might be that famous $10 million Rumble in the Jungle boxing fight between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman in 1974. Anyway, Mobutu's time ended and he eventually died of prostate cancer while exiled in Morocco. Here's a clip from that famous Rumble in the Jungle fight in Zaire, Kinshasa.
Beautiful national anthem by the band in attendance here. A tremendous evening in Zaire. There was a lot of talk about the possibility of
$10 million. All right, so I have to stop there, but seriously, who am I leaving off, right? There's Abdoulaye Wade, who ruled Senegal for 12 years before he was finally voted out, and he was grooming his son for succession, you remember, right? And remember Gnassingbé Eyadema, former Togolese president? He was one of Africa's first dictators who held on to power for nearly 4 decades. Anyway, you know, the crazy thing in all of this is that some current leaders still have these dictatorial characteristics, which is scary. All right, tell me about your dictator, or the one in your country. What were they notorious for? I want to hear from you. Send me an email at thebreakwithtracy@gmail.com or hit me up on Twitter at @thebreak_Tracy. I'm also on Facebook. Just type in The Break with Tracy and you'll find me. Thank you for watching.